Take a second in your life and think of a time where your anxiety had a stranglehold over you. That time that it grabbed you and just wouldn't let go. You have this urge to move away from it, drive away from it, and leave it in the rear view mirror, but nothing seems to work. Then there's even panic about your anxiety, making it even worse. My name is Mike Berger, and I can help by teaching you some techniques utilizing journaling that can break through that stranglehold and really help you make a determined stand against your anxiety. But interestingly enough, I'll also teach you how to turn toward your anxiety and gradually make friends with it. Strap in, there's a lot of information that is going to be covered in this video, but I promise to make every single point of value to you. As someone who experiences anxiety and has anxiety run in my family, I can attest to all of the approaches that are covered in these videos personally. And they have helped me make great strides over time with my anxiety. It also just so happens that I work inside of mental health and I train other mental health professionals. So I also talk about why these techniques work and what the research says about them. I'm not just a random person throwing things against the wall to see what sticks, although there's nothing wrong with that. I've used these techniques and they've also been used by thousands of others. Anxiety wants you to believe that there is something to be afraid of. At any point in time, you could be in two different states of mind about your anxiety. One is, I believe my anxiety, there is something to be afraid of. I am convinced, my anxiety has convinced me that this thing is to be feared. And then there's another state of mind where I know that my anxiety is incorrect, or at the very least, not telling me the accurate story about this particular topic. But it still feels really hard to convince my brain or body that that's the case. This is going to come up again later on when we talk about these different techniques and why they help. If you're ever experiencing extreme anxiety, it might be best to seek medical attention by a therapist or a doctor. When you're experiencing extreme anxiety, it can be like as if you're caught in an undertow, and even the best swimmers can't get out of an undertow sometimes. So it's best to have help. When your anxiety is really high, oftentimes the best techniques to help you with your anxiety are brain-body connections. And this is why things like dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, to get yourself out of the stress response and to regulate are the best when you're experiencing high anxiety. And the reason why I'm telling you that is because I'm saying that journaling is going to be great for low, medium, and sometimes high anxiety. But there are going to be times where even examining your thought process might not be enough because your brain-body connection is, you're feeling such a stress response in that moment, and you might need something to regulate, to bring you back down to a place where you can journal. So these are where techniques like sticking your head inside of a freezer or filling a bucket with ice water and submerging yourself for 10 to 15 seconds each time, that's where those types of techniques are going to come in handy. And then you can save the journaling for later. But you're here to learn about journaling, not that other stuff. The reason why I brought it up is because I want you to understand when journaling can help you and the limitations that journaling might have, and the times where you're really going to need to seek medical or professional help. One of the first techniques I'm going to teach you is from acceptance and commitment therapy. Now, if this seems kind of medical because I'm throwing out DBT, I'm throwing out ACT out there, things with acronyms and long names, I totally get it. But there's reasons why I'm bringing these things up, and it's because they work. If something has a name and it's been researched a lot of times, well, that means it's been through a rigorous research process that says that, hey, this works. And that's why I'm bringing it to you. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about it. The technique I'm going to teach you is called cognitive diffusion. And it works by allowing you to get space from your anxious thoughts. Isn't it just awesome that we're even capable of that? The human brain, right? It's wild. So firstly, we're establishing you are not your thoughts. And what we're about to do is observe our thoughts neutrally and write them down as they are on the page. And I'll tell you how to do that in a second. So here we go. The first part is actually spotting your anxious thought. So the anxious thought comes and it says, you are going to fail your presentation. Really, the first entire part of this is actually catching your thoughts, which I found to be challenging. One of the ways you can really start to do this is actually just by journaling in general, and journaling about your thoughts and about your emotions will allow you to make a better connection with them and understand where your anxious thoughts are coming from. If you are super practiced at blocking these things out and ignoring them, this is going to be harder for you. And unfortunately, I found that that's exactly what I was doing. Some of you are like, ugh, I really don't want to do that. Who wants to get in touch with things that exhibit negative emotions? It sounds like no fun at all, and I completely agree with you. I resisted this so much initially. However, there's a big distinction here. I'm not asking you to write these down and just dwell on your emotions, because we are going to slowly change them. So there's a difference, because some people utilize journaling and they're like, man, this really doesn't seem to be helping, and they're really dwelling on the negative things. Here's the thing about effective journaling is you have to be able to understand how to challenge some of the things that do get written on the page. And I'll tell you what, at first, when you're noticing these negative thoughts, it's not going to be fun for you the first couple times and you're writing them down and these things. So what I want you to do is I want you to kind of throw a little celebration or party for yourself when you're starting this process and you're starting to identify the anxious thoughts. Be like, great, I'm starting to get more in tune with this. I'm starting to understand myself better. And, let that dopamine hit of doing something new and interesting be a part of your journaling about your anxious thoughts. So, to go back to the anxious thought, you've trained yourself, you've spotted the anxious thought of, I'm going to fail this presentation. The next thing you're going to want to do is obviously write it down in your journal. Write it down, make sure it's there. Now that we have the anxious thought, we're going to change it so that we can get distance from it. So we're going to rewrite this thought by saying, I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail this presentation. I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail this presentation. It sounds like it's not going to do much, but there's a big, big difference between I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail this presentation and I'm going to fail this presentation. And everything about cognitive distortion is creating space between those thoughts. And I'll tell you why that's important when we get to the end of this technique. What's interesting to me about this is that sports psychologists actually teach athletes to do something similar. There was a real live post-game interview, and this happens all the time, with LeBron James. And in the interview, he said, LeBron James had a bad game. He missed a couple key shots down in the last 2 minutes. And what he did there is he created distance by saying LeBron James, not I. So he said, LeBron James had a bad game, instead of saying I had a bad game. That creates distance from you and your thoughts, and it's a protection. It can really be helpful when you do this for yourself. So even when you're thinking about yourself or when you're talking about yourself, you can even create space from your thoughts. Very interesting. The very next step is to keep writing. Having the thought that I'm going to fail this presentation. I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail this presentation. And each time you write it, I want you to say it in your mind in a different way. Maybe even mockingly, like, I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail this presentation, blah, 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 right? So making it seem stupid or silly, again, you're probably thinking, Mike, what are you teaching me right now? But it works. It creates space and even makes the thought become abstract and silly. Another thing you can do is you can write this smaller and smaller as you go down the page, as if it's disappearing. Some people will actually tear out the page, crumple it up, throw in the garbage, or put it in a box. That's their thought box. These are my anxious thoughts. I put them in a box. I don't need them right now. If I ever need them, I will take them out of the box. Obviously, they never do, but these are all helpful and research-based techniques, if you can believe it. Now that's cognitive diffusion. You can do this over and over and over again for yourself. And I have. It's one technique that I found incredibly helpful. Now, before you think that the purpose behind cognitive diffusion is to be rid of your anxiety, unfortunately, that's not the case. But it does something arguably even more helpful. Instead of trying to be rid of your anxiety, it teaches you how to be comfortable with your anxiety and kind of lessen the impact or the power that these anxious thoughts have over you and the control that they have over you. That feeling that you have in your body when you're thinking these anxious thoughts, hopefully the goal is that goes away. So it's teaching you how to have a different relationship with your anxious thoughts, and arguably that's really important. Another excellent way of using journaling to your advantage is called expressive writing. Dr. James Pennebaker actually developed this technique, and it has been shown to reduce stress, increase emotional well-being, and even have physical benefits to individuals. There have been over 200 clinical studies on this method and technique, and it is shown to be helpful for a lot of different groups of people. It involves writing freely about your deepest thoughts and emotions of stressful or anxiety-provoking situations. So again, here's another example of how to help you have to turn toward your anxiety. And to see benefits, though, you sometimes only need to write for 15 to 20 minutes a day for 3 to 4 days. So this is used for things like PTSD as well, but in this case, I'm going to talk about it in context to your anxiety. So what you want to do is you want to bring up the topic of your anxiety. If it's fear of flying, if it's public speaking, whatever it might be, the things that make you anxious is going to be your topic that you write about. And you're going to set a timer for 15 to 20 minutes. Now this part is really important. The rules are, who cares about grammar? Do not edit yourself. Just go. Just write. Write. This isn't for anybody else. You can burn it afterwards if you want to. What you're going to want to do is you want to get into the flow state and just keep writing. Usually I tell you guys to do these things in your journal, but there have been studies that utilize people typing on a computer and writing in that way. If you're more comfortable doing that, you're also fine doing that as well. Okay, so you have your topic. You're going to write for 15 to 20 minutes. You know the rules. How do we go about doing this? I want you to focus on the deep emotions. I want you to think about how it makes you feel, why it might have affected you in this different way. Talk about things that are connected to this: people, places, things, your belief system. And probably one of the more important things is personal experiences around this. Those are the instructions at a basic level, but If those feel a little abstract, don't worry. It kind of is a little abstract of an exercise. I mean, journaling really is, and a lot of people sometimes put a lot of limitations on their journaling. It doesn't always have to be that way, but if you need an example of how this might look and maybe how to do it versus how not to do it, I will give you one. So instead of saying something like, I feel overwhelmed by my workload, which is a perfectly fine sentence, I feel overwhelmed by my workload, we want to try to be more detailed in our explanation. So being more specific and saying things like, I feel like I can't breathe when I think about how much I need to do at work. Expressive journaling, that's exactly what it is. You want to be more expressive. Don't think too much about it though. The goal is to just keep writing. You probably get better at this as you do it and as you go on. By the fourth day, you might have much more detailed sentences than the first. Now you might be thinking, there really isn't much to this. How come this works? Oftentimes, we bottle up intense negative emotions. When we expressively write about these things, we bring it out instead of bottling it up. So much of treatment for anxiety involves turning toward it. If you think about, say, treatment for phobias, the typical treatment is hierarchical exposure therapy. In this type of therapy, you create a hierarchy of things that scare you about a specific phobia. So if you're afraid of needles, maybe number 3 on your list would be injecting a needle into an orange yourself. Or maybe that's higher up on the list. I don't know. But that's an example of something that's going to cause you anxiety. And the thing about it is, what's so fascinating is as you're turning toward your anxiety, as you're experiencing these things in your hierarchy and you go up the list, each time you do these things, you have a corrective experience that makes you more comfortable with whatever it is that you're afraid of. Your anxiety works by making you believe there's something to be afraid of. And one of the worst things that you can do is avoid the topic of your anxiety. Let me tell you why. So say you're afraid of needles and you avoid getting your flu shot. If you avoid getting the flu shot, let's say you even had an appointment and you decided not to do it and you stayed home instead, you're convincing your brain that you effectively avoided danger. So what we want to do instead is we have to turn toward the anxiety. If, say, you're watching TV and on the television there's someone who is using drugs and using a needle, it's free exposure therapy to watch that scene play out even though you're uncomfortable, and then say to yourself, okay, I watched the scene, it was very uncomfortable for me, and I'm okay. Everyone's okay, right? So that is turning toward your anxiety. And the expressive journaling that we're doing here is doing just that. It's pretty cool because expressive writing has actually been found to lower your cortisol levels with it, which is a stress hormone. Other studies have shown that people who expressively write can even perform better under stressful scenarios than those who are in the control group and did not use expressive writing. I've used this technique for myself. Again, it's been incredibly helpful to write about these things for myself. And in some cases, you see and feel the benefits of this for months at a time after only doing it for 4 days. Some people have long-lasting benefits from doing this technique. Just one suggestion though, that if you have recently experienced a traumatic event, it might not be the best thing for you to do alone, to journal about it right away. Give it some time so that you're not opening up Pandora's box right away, so to speak, and maybe seek the help of a professional. But there you go. Those are two incredibly effective techniques for journaling about your anxiety. My name is Mike Berger, and if you're new to journaling, I have another video right here that has 3 different journals that I utilize to become a more calm, effective, and productive person. Keep your pen on the page, and I hope to see you again for another journaling video.